Afternoon, Lord Michael Hastings.
Hello.
Thank you so much for welcoming me to House of Lords for a conversation about your life, your career. You've been a mentor and a friend to so many, but also to me. I'm so grateful for everything you've done over the years, advising, supporting, encouraging me and my journey in policy. But anyway, this is going to be a conversation about you. I think lots of people know about you, but you know, in this digital age, I want many more people to know about the career you've had, the impact you've had, and to encourage other people. So maybe just a very quick, brief introduction about who you are, and we'll go through your history from BBC to KPMG and to today.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. That's very kind of you. And just on the career thing, before I get on to that, I'll do it the other way around. I've always believed that I've never had a career, and I still believe I don't have a career. What I have from finishing college to now, so from 21 to now, 66, is I've had a series of opportunities. Television, business consulting, public relations, media and public affairs, radio, TV, charities, foundations, parliament, just a series of universities, a series of opportunities. And I've always believed, two things that relate to that. One is that I wait for God to point out the moment. So don't apply for things, wait for things to come your way. And secondly, if you get asked to do something, like I got asked to do live television with a week's notice for TVAM in its last year of existence, and I had to pull myself together and say, okay, I'm going to do this. I had no training, and the only thing I was given was a clothing allowance to get some bright clothes to look good for morning television.
Really?
Yeah, that was it. That was what the chairman of TVAM said was important, is to look good for morning TV, so no black, no blue, just look bright. And I remember going shopping in London and buying all these very bright jackets and things like that. But I've always believed in take the challenge and try.
And where do you think that mindset comes from? Because that's quite a unique way of looking at the world. And
well, I don't believe in the necessity of what many people call imposter syndrome. If you spend your time thinking you're not meant to be somewhere, you'll feel like you're not meant to be there. But if you spend your time instead saying, who can I connect with here? Who can I build a friendship with here? What relationship can I support and enable? Then you'll feel at home. And one of the benefits my brother and I, our very dear parents who are long gone, gave us was making sure. My brother was born in Huddersfield, northeast. I was born in Widnes, northwest. The town of Huddersfield then, the town of Widnes then, were dominant. Well, when I say dominantly, virtually 100% English white, which is fine because that's what they were. And I remember saying to and the schools that my brother and I went to were, with the exception of the two of us, 100% white. So I remember saying to Mum and Dad when we were in the sort of late primary age, why did we always live in all white areas, and why did we always go to all white schools? Because we could have gone to Manchester, for example, or Liverpool. We could have gone where lots of other people of different cultures and countries were. But no, it was absolute. So my mother said...
It was deliberate, was it?
It was absolutely deliberate. My mother said, my dear mother, who was born in Jamaica, of a Panamanian father and a Ghanaian heritage mother, two back. My father born in Angola, of Indian parents, and both of them coming from a rich, traditional Caribbean, African, Central American, Asian culture, were adamant that my brother and I should feel, this is what my mother actually said, we wanted you both to be 100% comfortable wherever you were, and therefore confident wherever you were. And if we'd had you surrounded as young boys by an all-black community, you'd get into a black mindset. And that would incline you to this imposter syndrome thing.
Because when you were removed from that black community into the wider community, you would feel I don't fit in because it's not the black community you're
Exactly.
originally from.
I was always completely comfortable. And completely comfortable in a black environment, completely comfortable in a white environment, completely comfortable in an Asian environment. It doesn't matter what environment, completely comfortable. I don't notice. I mean, I just had, literally this week, someone from 1974 who wrote to me to tell me that he had been racist towards me at school.
No way.
Now, I wrote back to say, I have no recollection of you ever being racist. In fact, I rather looked up to you and thought you were great.
So you remembered this person?
Yeah. I remembered him very well, and I always remember thinking, because he was 2 years older than me, I always remember thinking he's a real inspiration. Such a good guy. Now, if he had been racist towards me,
You didn't know?
I didn't notice.
Interesting.
So that didn't affect or afflict my behaviour. And to give you a little story from my very dear mother, who died in 2010, my very dear mother, when I was a 4-year-old child in Widnes, and we were walking along the main road to my father's surgery. He was a dental surgeon. So we're walking to my father, and my mother had one of those 1960s furry, cheap coats on.
Fake fur? Or
Fake fur, absolutely fake fur. We couldn't afford anything else. And me in my little coat, and I'm holding her hand. So Mum's here, and I'm holding her hand. And this lady, I still remember, I can see it right now. This lady comes up to us. You see, remember, I'm of the pre-camera phone age. So everything stays in here. It's not.
No pun intended, like photographic memory.
Yeah, but literally, because you saw it, you experienced it.
Yeah.
And so this woman comes up, and she says to my mother, perfectly calmly, can I ask you, before you people came here, did you used to live in trees? And my mother, and I'm looking at her. I mean, I'm only 4, and I'm thinking, I quite like the idea of a treehouse.
The innocence of youth.
Yeah, why not? I mean, but then I remember my mother reaching out her hand onto this lady's arm and going, no dear, we lived in houses just like you. Good day. And we moved on. Now, a lot of people now would go microaggression, I've been targeted, profiling, would get on their high horse and start riding around in circles and causing an issue of it and finding who they could report it to and making a scene. But what I observed in my very sweet mother then, which is a very important lesson for me, and I hope it's a lesson for many others, is you have to choose to marginalise those who marginalise you.
Mm.
Otherwise, they will marginalise and you maximise the problem. And then you become obsessed.
And you give the issue agency and power?
Totally. The agency takes you over. People spend their lives griping and complaining and fussing, but feeling victimised. Now, the truth is, there is a lot of racial victimisation. There is a lot of police profiling. There is a lot of injustice in the court system, which is a desperate issue for me, and I feel so strongly about those matters because I have the joy of knowing so many people in prison and recently out of prison. So I feel so strongly about this principle of innocent until proven guilty, and then once you've served your time, innocent again. But the system holds a racial grid, which more than triples up the sentencing and more than 9 times picks up on the stop and search and all of those things which we know are so negative. But should I spend my life in a pressure cooker of I'm hated because I'm black, I'm dumbed down because I'm black, they've got me because I've got tons of it. I mean, there was a time here at the House of Lords. It actually happened to me twice. Once it happened to me at the BBC when I came in with a car. But the other time here, I was actually sitting in my car in the House of Lords car park. I was on the phone doing something, but I was sitting in the car, I was inside the security area, I'm sitting there, and I'm just sitting there, and this policeman comes up, taps on the window. So I just went, hello, chauffeurs are meant to park up.
No. Seriously.
Seriously. And first of all I said, excuse me, this isn't really a show for like this is not a show for
Aren't the security and police details supposed to have a list?
They are, but this man, now I reported him, he was dealt with and he was dismissed. And for somebody who chooses an act of deliberate ignorance, we should be sharp and blunt and treat it with the discipline it requires. But did I go home that night and get wound up? No. Because what my mother showed me was, don't live in the victimization. Don't turn every little microaggression into a macro bomb site. Live as though you have the right to be and to belong. And help others to have that sense.
And I think that attitude gives you an energy and longevity, because if you are picking lots of battles, you'll tie yourself out.
You won't get drain yourself through the battles, and you always feel like the system's got it in for you. Now I say to many of our dear black friends here in the UK, I say, listen, you go spend some time in Nigeria, spend some time in Ghana, spend some time in Kenya, spend some time in South Africa, spend some time in Uganda. You'll see how difficult it is to get on, and everybody's black. So society is not weighted in favor of those who are just ordinary. It is weighted in favor of those who have assets and economic value, and they call the shots. And we all know that, especially now in a mass media age. If you have money, you can represent yourself any old how, and that goes with style and fashion and performance and everything else. And if you don't have money, well, you better find a way to get by.
And can I just ask, in those instances where someone is, to borrow the term, casually racist, subconsciously biased or racist, what would your view be on the energy combating that, or if it's all, again, would you...
Well, I mean, it's literally again this week, someone said in a tea meeting, and the coloured people, and I said, no, you mean the black people? Oh yeah. And then they said coloured again. I said, no, I told you before, the black people, don't use the word again. So you posit, but you don't get yourself into start throwing things around the room and storming out and slamming the door. There's too much of that.
Yeah, got it.
And the real aim, and I believe this so firmly about race relations. And race relations, remembering that race relations is not just black and white, it's people of different hues of colour and culture. So they can go to very pale. I mean, I saw this on a study that was done, I think in 2021. It was in The Economist, so therefore it must be true. And it was in the light of the killing of George Floyd. They did a series of ongoing articles from 20 into 21, which looked at structural racism behaviours all over the world. And they had a survey which asked the question of X number of thousands, this country, that country, would you be comfortable to have somebody live next to you who is of a different colour or culture to you, different language, colour or culture? Now you think, in the light of George Floyd, most people say, the US is bound to be the worst place. South Korea.
Not too surprised.
And because it's a monochrome culture.
Yeah.
Everybody looks, they don't all look, of course, like people say to black people, you all look the same, which we evidently don't when they look at me. You're so ugly. But
Thanks, Michael.
You're not, you're charming.
Thank you.
But people want to say, well, you look the same. Of course we don't look the same. But people say that. Now, of course, all people in South Korea and Vietnam and Cambodia and Japan and China don't look the same. Of course they don't. But there's a sort of monochrome. In the same way, go to any African capital, you could say, okay, well, people do sort of all look the same. Same people all do. So, in circumstances where you are the majority, it is still possible to be oppressed. It is still possible to be picked on. It's still possible for injustice to happen. It's still possible not to be able to get work. It's still possible to be at the bottom of the economic barrel. Of course it is. And in circumstances, people choose enemies of their own kind.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately. I mean, I witnessed in South Africa a number of years ago the attitude of black South Africans towards black Nigerians who emigrated to South Africa.
I was in South Africa during that time actually, and it felt viscerally dangerous. I remember going from the airport to where I was staying, and the taxi driver asking where I was from.
Yeah.
You know, culturally, and I didn't want to say Nigeria because I knew there were protests, there were bad things happening, xenophobic, really deep things happening there.
Yes. Well, and so there is African to African, there is black to black. I mean, you know, it'll be Asian to Asian, it'll be Middle Eastern to Middle Eastern, as is evidently the case, and it'll be American to American without introducing any colour issues into it, because people take an ideology on. You know, am I a Republican or Democrat? So I'm going to line up with them, I'm going to line up with them, and I'm going to hate you because you're the other side. That's everywhere. How do you break that? And you know, one of the people I really got to admire here, obviously sadly these two are no longer alive, but Ian Paisley, who was the leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, and just a stalwart Irish political leader from Northern Ireland who was just absolutely committed to the Union, completely. A man of enormous physical stature and great energy, but he had this historic, utter, not just dislike, it was like a hatred of the Southern Irish and what you would call Sinn Féin, the Shinners, you would call it the Shinners. And there were sinners, and Sinn Féin. Now, you know, and Martin McGuinness, who was right at the helm of the IRA army, and all sorts of atrocities had happened there. Ultimately, they became friends. And the two of them agreed to be Minister and First Minister and Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland in order to facilitate the peace 25 years ago. And they worked together, and they walked together, and they laughed together, and they ate together. But track back 10 years, they were daggers drawn, as we used to say in old days. There was hatred because they didn't know each other. Get to know people who are different.
And I think in any geopolitical discourse, warfare on peacemaking, knowledge of the other is kind of the foundation of peace. I may, if we
Yes.
can, switch gears, because this is supposed to be about you and your career. So
I'm
let's talk
boring.
about the first opportunity
Okay.
you had in the BBC, and maybe just truncate it because of time. But you rose quite quickly, I think.
I did.
To be Director of Public Affairs.
Yes,
Is that right?
that's right.
Yeah. So tell us about that experience.
Well, I got drawn. I was at TVAM, commercial television, until its last day. I'd already switched to join GMTV, which is the replacement breakfast television station. So I was chief political correspondent at GMTV, and then the BBC came after me to go to BBC South East to present.
You were headhunted.
I was directly. So I mean, you know, people just ring up. I mean, that's why they just ring up. So the head of BBC South East rang me up, and I was invited to present a weekly politics program called Around Westminster, but also to do regional education news for BBC South East, which is basically London to Oxford. It's a big region and very powerful. And I was only there in that role for about a year and a quarter before I was then drawn in to the hub of the BBC's control centre, the Director General's office, the corporate office, and the head of public affairs. And I was in that role then for 9.5 years, which was absolutely wonderful. So,
Sorry.
my total time at the BBC was 12 years.
12 years.
12 years, because I also did the corporate responsibility role at the tail end before I then moved on to KPMG.
Which we'll get onto in a minute.
Yes.
For people interested in public affairs, interested in journalism, any lessons, advice for getting those opportunities, for
Yes.
surviving in that space?
Yeah. The reason I was given the opportunity to be head of public affairs and to lead the BBC's charge to Parliament and government, and frankly to win, as I did, 3 licence fee rounds and 2 charter renewals and about 4 pieces of major legislation. The reason I was given that opportunity, I mean, obviously there was an army of advisors and policy people as well, but I had to do the front facing here in Parliament all the time.
And for the people that don't know, that is getting the government mandate to have a BBC licence,
Yes.
renew the charter that
Yes.
says this is the BBC
Yes.
funded service.
Yes. And the licence we had to go up every year. So we had to win a vote in Parliament every year, which, you know, difficult. I mean, it's now set, subsequent governments have set it for 5-year terms. So it's not quite the same now, but it was back then.
Wow.
And you know, and I made it every year. We got it. But here's the key thing. I was gifted the opportunity not because I had a qualification in public affairs. I didn't. I had no qualification. In fact, I had no qualification in anything I did. I taught, apart from teaching. That was the only thing. But I was gifted it because, as the powers that be in the Director General's network said to me, we notice that you get on with people very well, and we see that you're utterly impartial, and you don't seem to nitpick over people's peculiarities. You just make friends with them, and that's true. I just make friends with people. So as a result of that, I mean, I got to know Ian Paisley very well, and I really liked him. I wish Martin McGuinness had been here at that time. I could have got to know him too. But Ian Paisley, who was, you know, like I said, such a big but public, aggressive figure, he was charming and sweet and kind and interested. And I found so many MPs, no matter what their political cue was, they just were interested in being people. They were interested in me, I was interested in them. So I would say to anybody who's interested in public affairs, remember, the art of persuasion is winning somebody else's mind. And you win people's minds by whether they think you're honourable, true, kind, and pleasant. You can hand people the best briefing in the world with all the data possible, but if you're aggressive with it and demanding and unkind, they're throwing it in the bin.
Because they just don't connect on that individual level.
It's emotional.
Yeah.
All decisions are emotional, one way or another. I mean, people make they make logical decisions, but they make logical decisions in consideration with the opinions of others. So it's emotional.
And how they feel.
And how they feel.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, moving on then from the BBC now to KPMG,
yes.
Where I suppose the KPMG paymaster saw or wanted that same thing about your ability to kind of connect with people.
Yeah.
So corporate affairs or director of
global head of
corporate
citizenship. Yeah.
Yeah.
So for the whole network.
Amazing. And for people that aren't aware of what that looks like or what your responsibilities were, just
well, at the time, $30 billion business, 164 countries, which grew to a couple more in my time, and my responsibility was to create the framework for the business to be a responsible citizen in each city and community in which it operated. So to be, as we would now see, on the right side of sustainability and environmental duty and protective of the energy it would use and consume, and to reduce and therefore to give back better oxygen to the world, to use the opportunity of philanthropic commitments. So I mean, we managed to tabulate in my time there that on average every year, KPMG partnerships were giving away around about $120 million a year of cash into causes and institutions and community development in all sorts of places around the world.
And this was before climate change was sexy and trendy as it is now.
Absolutely, yeah,
Many
absolutely.
years before that. Yeah.
But also to do, you know, I mean, we had, I tell you what, one that I loved the most. I mean, two that I really loved. So take Vietnam. So I went to see, in Vietnam, I went to see KPMG staff. So remember, these are auditors, tax advisors, consultants. Going and collecting people from their homes and bringing them to a central eye clinic where they could have cataracts removed.
So this is a voluntary program. The
voluntary program, 100%, and for these very small, poor, and often frightened people who were cataracts have taken their eyesight away, and there is a charitable foundation which is providing cataract surgery. So KPMG people go and get them, bring them. The operation only takes about 20 minutes. Stay with them during the time of the operation. They can then be up and about within an hour and take them home. That's a wonderful thing to do. Wonderful, because the person is literally blind before they come. That was one of the programs we ran in Vietnam. I was so proud of that. I was in 2 operating theatres watching these cataract operations take place, just being proud of it, because this is what being a responsible citizen means.
And was there a tension of delivering that when because I've worked in a consultancy before as well, management consultancy, the time is billed by the hour.
Yes.
So maybe there's a tension of, this isn't affecting our bottom line. Was that hard to get across to those directors in the different countries, or?
No, because thankfully most of the chairmen, I had a chairwoman, most of the chairmen that I worked under in my 13 years had a very strong values covenant. There were corporate values, but they had values too. And it meant that they and their senior leadership teams really believed that this was intrinsic to the health of the business. But look at it another way. If KPMG people are delivering services to a health organisation, and that health organisation then thinks, I need tax services, where do you think they're going to go? See, the symbiotic connection.
It's so symbiotic.
It's obvious.
Yeah.
And one of the joys, I obviously won't mention the companies, but part of my role was to win business for the business. So I won a lot of business for the business because many businesses, and I'm talking about macro, multi-billion, huge global businesses, wanted an audit partner or a tax partner or a consulting partner that held the same value approach that they had, cared about the same set of issues they cared about, had a vision for a world beyond today. And so everything we were able to do, whether it was, so the other one I thought was just so wonderful. This is KPMG Malaysia. Big coral reefs down the Indian Ocean side of Malaysia. Wonderful. No, the Pacific side of Malaysia, that's right, down. And they would, because of climate change and sea warming, corals get bleached and die. If a coral is at risk of being bleached, because it's too hot and therefore it's got gummy, you can actually clean them before they die, clean off the residue that's sitting on the coral.
Oxidized residue.
Yeah, and let them come alive again. So KPMG audit staff were going down diving with toothbrushes to clean coral. It's painstaking work, but you've got an oxygen tank and there you are down for half an hour or so, and you're cleaning a hole, and you've got 20, 30 people cleaning coral. Now, somebody's saying, what has that got to do with audit? It's got to do with protecting and saving the value of the planet in which you live, and therefore the ecosystem in which you work, and therefore the business and industry that relies upon that ecosystem. Think of the whole cycle of life and health.
For people listening, again, a word of advice for thriving in that space, corporate affairs, would it be different to your kind of skills and the things that helped you succeed in the BBC, or would you say they were still kind of the same?
Well, the thing I had to teach people a lot in KPMG was don't be a technocrat about things that are essentially passions. So if you were to say, for example, you really absolutely want to protect the ecosystem and the natural environment, you could delve from that into all the data spots for reporting and analysis. Very important. But if you lose the passion for protecting the ecosystem, wildlife and the natural environment, you've lost the point. Because people don't buy boring data for the sake of it. They might have to use it, but it's
often a secondary or tertiary thing. You look after the spark, the passion.
The spark and the passion is what you want to have, and that's what you want to sell on to your clients. So that's how business was won.
Love it. Let me move on now.
Yeah.
I want to move on to some of your other chair roles. I think there are too many.
I agree. I'm trying to resign. I try to resign from things and then people won't let me go.
We all want to benefit from your wisdom, from your skills, etc. Maybe one of the biggest ones, and one that I remember and was involved in some of the things you did with Vodafone. So that was chair of the Vodafone Foundation.
Well, I wasn't chair. I was a trustee of the
Vodafone Foundation. How was that experience?
11 years.
11 years. Wow.
One of the principles I believe in too, and I was chairman of Crime Concern for 21 years. I don't believe in this 3 years and then 3 years renewal and then you're off. That's nonsense. Because the real expertise that you build during the time of working within something, especially if it's gone from zero to here, where you've built it up and you've worked it as it's built up, and then you just throw that expertise away and bring someone else in for the sake of a good governance plan, that's nonsense. What you need is to retain the wisdom and learning. In my time, I'll give you this terrible example, but in my time as 21 years as chairman of crime concern, I got to know 14 different ministers responsible for crime prevention in the Home Office. In other words, where was the bank of knowledge? It wasn't there.
The institutional memory.
Institutional memory was wiped away because, we're going to move on. But no, learn how to learn things, absorb knowledge, and turn it into positive, practical, deliverable policy and outcomes.
That's so interesting because I'm a trustee of Mercy Ships UK, a big Christian faith-based charity that provides hospital services on big boats across Africa and the world. And we're having that same discussion as well. And I think one of the things we're thinking about is actually making space then for new ideas, energy, but actually, and I won't name the person, but the person who is proposing this is really noble and wants to make space for that. But I think they've got a wealth of knowledge that actually we should retain on.
Exactly. Try to retain. I mean, you can always, we expand the Vodafone, expanded, and actually that's not a bad thing. Don't get stuck on minimum numbers. But here's the beautiful thing. I saw one of the most wonderful things that we did on the foundation. It's still ongoing now. Thank God for it. Was a fistula relief program for women, and you know what fistula is. Basically bladder wound-based bladder damage, and women are not able to control their bladder behavior because they've been raped and attacked and abused and in some cases shot.
Or I think sometimes FGM
contributes
that as well.
It does, and we discovered this community of fistula women near Dar es Salaam, capital of Tanzania. And so what was the challenge? Okay, is there a hospital? Yes, there is. Okay, is it sufficient for what was nearly 30,000 women? No, it's not. Okay, let's build an extension to the hospital and equip it with what it needs and get the doctors and nurses and pay them. And we did that. Wonderful. But you know what? Here was the smart Vodafone related bit. People think, what's it got to do with Vodafone? Well, money is money. That's one thing. But secondly, people had appointments to come for their assessments and then for their surgery. How do you think they got the appointments? Via the phone. How did they get the money for the taxi? Via the phone, via the M-Pesa network. How did they pay for the By the phone. And who provided that? Vodafone. So
makes sense.
Symbiotic relationships.
Makes sense and makes dollar sense.
It does.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Another thing that you're involved in that we should talk about, the mentorship that you provide to black professionals, young people, more mature people. Oh my goodness, your energy, the time, the space that you make in your home, in your places of work, over the years have been phenomenal. It's helped me, and probably not an exaggeration to say thousands of other people. And also when I think about the network effects of that, because those people that you uplift and support are helping other people. Where does that come from, Michael? Honestly, like why, how? I mean, I think I can guess, but it'd be lovely to get on video.
Well, the scriptures are very clear, and I, as a follower of Jesus, I want to be as closely aligned to what is the truth of scriptures, ordinances to me on them. Jesus, Luke chapter 4, quoting Isaiah chapter 61, so the call of the prophet 800 years before Jesus making the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. Love that. To set the captives free, sight to the blind, release for the prisoners. Ooh, love that. And to declare the year of the Lord's acceptance. Now, if I'm meant to be following Jesus, I need to do those things. It's so simple. And the writing to the Hebrews, chapter 13, says, identify with those who are struggling and with those in prison, as though you were there with them. Now, you can't identify with people by praying in the corner. You have to be with them. You've got to spend time with them. You've got to meet them.
let's focus on the work you do with people in prisons and in custody, which you do a lot of. So I failed to keep track. How many charities are you involved in? How often? I think once a month you visit prisons at least. Yeah.
Be 2 this week.
Okay.
And there were some notoriously, they were seen as notoriously very bad, and there are, there's a whole ton of people who did a lot of very bad things. One of the things I remind people about now, and I hope the listener and the viewer really swallows hard on this. These are government figures now, so this is not me making up. On any average year, say 2020, 22, 1980, on any average year, there's about somewhere between 280 to 320,000 crimes which are reported. Obviously there could be multiple cases, but around about that number. Now, the police then are meant to get on the case, solve the crime. Well, the truth is most crimes are not solved. And of that, say 300,000 crimes, the actual Home Office figure for 2022 indicates 5.7%, which then come forward for charge and conviction in court. What that means is that 96%, 95% are still out there. They're on the bus, they're in the tube, they're in the shop, they're in the school, they're in the headquarters, they're in the office, they're in the political place, they're in parliament, they're everywhere, and you'll never know. And the nation wants to have this look down their nose at those who are in prison. I'd say, they are paying the price for having been caught for the crimes they've committed. All the people out there aren't paying any price. So don't spend your time despising those who are paying the price and re-earning their innocence. Spend time thinking about how you prevent a culture of criminality, so people don't feel they need to steal and need to break and need to damage.
That's a very powerful paradigm shift in narrative and perspective, because I've never thought about it in that way, where it's so unbalanced, as you say. 5% caught, others aren't, and those people are amongst us, and
everywhere.
We don't turn our nose up at those.
No, because you don't know who they are. But the thing about working with people in prison is you discover how wonderfully transparent they are. Because what are you trying to hide? You're there because I never ask people, what did you do? Because that's a bit insulting. I just ask them, how long are you here for? Then you know. Because you know the level of which sentence. So you can kind of figure it out. And then they kind of then tell you everything. And the aim, what we do, our team, we're about 30 who work together and visiting various prisons and working with the men. And what we're trying to do, free by the way, we've never received a single penny of support from anybody, and we've never ever asked for expenses or anything for what we've done now for the last 9.5 years, nearly 10 years, is we want to be a beacon of consistency and hope. Again, Home Office figures. For people serving a prison sentence longer than 3 years, which is roughly half the prison estate, only 9% ever get a visit. 90% never see anyone.
Wow.
And if I mention this in a circle, some of the meetings we do in prisons, you see the men's eyes well up, because no one's come. No one writes, no one calls, no one comes. Christmas is alone, Easter's alone, birthday's alone, no one comes. Families are embarrassed, people feel shamed, let the family down. So we are consistent. We've now made 41 visits to one particular prison every 2 months.
Amazing.
Just planning our next one for the next 2 months. And we've then added, if you add all the other prisons in, we're around, at the moment, about 55 visits we've done now in 9 years. And it's emotionally very draining, because you're meeting real people who often feel that they've been hard done by. In many cases they have. harder sentences if they're black than if they're white. Recall sentences, so dull. Bringing people back to prison is costing the taxpayer an inexcusable amount of money when you can deal with these issues in the community. I mean, unnecessary.
You talk about the emotionally draining. I remember the most emotionally draining part of the visit for me is the saying goodbye. Because
yes, because you get to know them, they're real human beings.
Yeah. I know time's against us, so the last thing I want to talk about is maybe flipping the representation of black men in prisons on its head, to talk about representation of black men, black people in policy and politics. You've been a crossbencher for
20 years.
20 years. Improvements, some improvements, still a long way to go. What's been your take of representation of black people in policy and politics?
Well, we're okay in the House of Lords. We're at the representation figure. I think we're about a third over the the average of black people in the population. So we're okay. I mean, all right. House of Commons a bit better. One side is a bit more obviously inclusive, and the other side has got work to do. And it ought to be, but here's the thing. I would love to see elected MPs of every cultural type. We now have a Prime Minister who's of Indian background, the First Minister in Scotland of a different religious and political, religious and cultural background, the Mayor of London of a different religious and cultural background. The diversity is rich, and we've 3 women as Prime Minister. The United States hasn't even got not even near 1. So thank God for a country that is able to allow people to come through. But here's the thing, I go back to Martin Luther King's famous quote that he doesn't want his children to be known for the colour of their skin, but for the content of their character. You see, you could say, and this is going to be very dangerous to say this, just imagine Robert Mugabe had been your black elected MP. Would he do a good job? No. Because his distinct corrupt self-interest. I'd rather have a white MP than a black one who's distorted for self-interest. It's not about the colour of the skin. The same can apply to, in a very white area, you could have a black MP who's absolutely brilliant and the white one is completely dead. You see, the issue is not about the colour, it's about the character. And we ought to be looking for people in political life whose interest is public service, sacrifice, and elevating those who are marginalised. That's what matters. And solving the problems of people who cannot get their issues resolved. Doesn't matter what colour they are.
Do you think conversations about that then, of that focus on the colour of the skin, going back to the very point you made earlier about the kind of, imbalanced focus on microaggressions, take energy away from the kind of representation we need, or the kind of politics and policies that we need?
We could get too easily consumed by, do they look like, are they the right colour, are they come from the right background? That's not the point. The point is, can they identify meaningfully, and are they present in the reality of what people are suffering or struggling or fighting, or somebody is. You want somebody who's an effectively positive business person. If you're going to be an MP in an area with a lot of industrial life and new technology businesses, you better have an MP who understands that stuff, because you want positive representation from understanding, not from colour or culture. Now, if you're an MP, an elected MP for an area with a very high black population, you could be a white MP, but you really are loved and treasured and known because you're present and you solve things, rather than somebody who comes from the same cultural or colour background but is never there.
And has no connection with the community.
And has no connection with the community. The issue is always, do people love the cause they're in enough to serve it? And that's not a colour issue, that's a character issue.
Let's end on a more general note now about what's next, because what's gone before has been such a vast array of different, public affairs, education. We didn't even talk about crime, etc. What's next for Lord Hastings?
Death.
No, that's next in a long-term sense. I meant in the short to medium sense.
Well, they always just say the two things you can't avoid: death and taxes.
Yeah.
I'm waiting for death. Taxes I get all the time. That'd be quite nice. But
Have you thought about your funeral?
Yeah, I have actually.
Okay.
I have,
Okay.
and I hope it's very short and costs almost nothing. The same as my mother and father's funeral.
Okay.
Very short, costs nothing, no headstones. Don't waste the time, because I know my spirit goes to be with Jesus. I'm not interested in what happens to the body, and whatever assets they give them to the people who need them. So
Okay.
that's my honest view. I'm not into parading and all this.
Okay, but anyway, medium to short term.
I am taking an increasing interest in supporting indigenous African businesses. So I'm on the board now of an African business network that's in 9 countries on the continent, and also owns a European operation in Germany, and will be expanding here into the UK. So I'm helping them as a non-exec director, and I'm very committed to seeing the great flourishing potential of the continent come to the surface. And the most important thing we need to do for all of that, the assets that the countries of the African continent provide, from the coffee to the cocoa, to the diamonds to the oil, to the agricultural products, we need them finished, produced, and delivered from the country in which they come. Not sent off to Switzerland to make Swiss chocolate. Does not exist. Belgian chocolate does not exist.
Production can exist on the continent.
Exactly. We've got to get indigenous production of indigenous quality materials, of things that are produced on the continent, because then the economic value goes to the people who are there, and that will boost those economies.
Well, knowing the success you have, or the things that you put your hands to, I'm excited to see that. Lord Michael Hastings, thank you for your time. I think we'll end it there.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Bless you.